The folks out here putting in real work, not just talking about it, but being about it. And these times and days, we need that more than ever, not less. And the first thing I want to say is that we should be grounded here in something more real, right? There's nothing about us that's wrong with us. There's something around us that's wrong. When we talk about what we see today in the world, wars everywhere, rumors of war everywhere, people claiming that the second coming's coming and this is a holy war and this is a holy war from all sides, you know we find ourselves in a unique position right now in these days and times. And as an educator who taught in the school district of Philadelphia for over 12 years in classrooms from Kensington to Germantown to places where folks are afraid to walk down the street, yet the students that I taught were some of the smartest and brightest people I ever met in my life. And they taught me so much about the world when I thought I knew I was stepping in the classroom to teach them. And see, that's the difference. That's how human relations work. Real education is the ability to talk about and talk with people about the world to get a deeper understanding about who we think we are and who we think we want to be. Now, we find ourselves in a situation where there's more mirages and camouflages more than ever. We're flooded with information every single day, yet our minds still remain empty. Our meaning still remains purposeless. And it becomes our duty, it becomes incumbent upon us to recognize this. So when I was asked to speak at the health fair, I knew that we were speaking more than just physical health. We're talking about spiritual health. We're talking about mental well-being. We're talking about the ability to position and position ourselves into a larger frame that we see amongst our people. And when I say our people, everybody knows that we are interconnected. There's one people and we're all connected. So the pain and the sorrow and the disease that we see in others, that exists within us. And if we don't recognize that, we already lost that war. Now, there's a book by Dr. Maramba Ani called Uhuru. And Uhuru in the book, she talks about a being that's incomplete, a being that measures itself not by a collective, but by individualism, one that separates into boxes our lived realities so they're not seen as interconnected. When we look at that reality, we see that every single day. We see it in our students that blame themselves about a system that has situated them in a position where they don't have the opportunity or the ability to even start the process to do what we call thinking. To be able to analyze what's in front of their faces, because what they're told right in front of their faces is to hustle. It's to get yours, don't worry about them. Now, everybody remember when you were younger on the playground and the teachers would be like, oh, don't mess with them. All of us, you got to play fair. You got to get along and everything. And then when you got into high school, it'd be like, oh, don't worry about them kids. Worry about yourself. This contradiction comes at the very foundation of us trying to relate to one another. So one quote I always use with my students when I was in the classroom is from a rapper, Talib Kweli. And I would always say, if you travel down the river of tears in the boat of broken promises with heavy fog, it's hard to be clear exactly what your knowledge is. So how do you know who you are is really who you are? How does it define who you think you are? And how does it define how others look at you? This fundamental question, this fundamental idea about who we think we are is much more on display now more than ever. When we see this reality, we have to start shifting focus. But just like a disease, if we don't know we actually have it and diagnose it properly, we'll be wasting time, energy, and resources on things that don't actually get us what we need. And that's liberation of the mind, liberation of the spirit, liberation of our whole people. And these things, like I said before, are interconnected. So I've been an educator for about 20 years. And one thing that I've found is that the institutions that I have worked in and helped out and uplifted at times operate within that separate box type of reality. They want the rhetoric. They want people to be like, we're here to teach our children to be free. We're here to teach our children to know this and that, but in reality, they want our children to co-sign the toxicity and wickedness that this culture and this system has produced. And that's a horrible thing to think about, ain't it? When I talk to my own children, I got 4 boys, and when we talk about these things and we look at television, when we look at the movies that are in front of them every day, when they look at TikTok and Instagram, I have conversations about what message are they trying to teach you with those things. And I measure what they know based on their answer. And if we don't have these conversations with our children, with each other, in school classrooms, outside of school classrooms, what are we actually talking about? Are we just simply talking about fitting into ourselves with the logic of the present system, which is unsustainable, which is dying? It is dying, y'all. And if we don't start to do something right now, we are already dead. So currently, everybody here ever heard of quantum physics? So these scientists have discovered that time isn't linear, that it overlaps each other. That is something our ancestors and indigenous people knew for thousands of years already. But that means the reality is right now in this conversation and what we talk about, what we do right this second, has already affected what would be. And what has happened has already influenced who we are. Think about that. What has already happened influenced who we think we are. So who do we think we are as we move into the future? Are we simply just going to co-sign and allow what already exists to perpetuate itself until it no longer exists? That's the danger in which we see right now. But talking this type of truth, I can tell you right now, has already got me in trouble. I have outside groups saying that talking about these type of things is anti-American. Think about that. Simply questioning and wanting to see a better world is anti-American. But that means we have to go to the root. And as a history teacher, I know what that root's all about. This system was founded on genocide, the enslavement of people, the rationalization of racialized hierarchies and exploitation that base itself off extraction. And somehow, if you think that we have stepped away from that and become more enlightened and aware, we already are making a mistake. We can't fix something that has already been working. So when you see like MAGA and people talking about make America great again, they're already talking about make it what it was. The same logic that rationalized enslavement, the same rationalization that talks about extraction of natural resources, extraction of people, exploitation of people around the world. And again, these things are interconnected, but they want us to think of it as separate. Worry about yourself. Get yours. Get yours and you can free others. But the one thing that they leave out is when you get yours, step back. How much are you willing to risk what you received? And see, that's the dirty little secret. I have been told before, oh, well, you know you have to feed your children. You might not want to say that. You might not want to do that. But then the real question of repair, of restoration, the ability to go back and fetch already what has existed. There's no coincidence when we talk about Africana thinking, when we talk about indigenous ideas, that all those ideas, regardless of where you found yourself in the world with indigenous cultures, always recognize the interconnectedness of humanity. They also recognize the relationship with the earth is tied to the relationship that we have internally. So when you see what we see out in the street, where people do have a large mental health issue, and I've been around the world from Johannesburg to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania to Zanzibar to New York to, California, all these places, and you see the same sickness going around. And it doesn't matter if I found myself in Oxford, UK, and a person of Pakistani descent with the same mental health issues that I see in the streets of where I live. And the goal shouldn't be, and unfortunately this is what pumped to our children a lot, get yours, move out, and then worry about yourself. Then the reality then becomes they don't stay where they need to be to contribute to the families and the worlds that they already exist in and were born into. So what do you think happens as a result? We end up walking around like chickens with our heads cut off. Just searching, just thinking, and just keep on moving. So I've also experienced people coming to me and also putting ideas out here that somehow, if we talk like this, we're going to find ourselves in danger. You can't say that. You can't do that. What about this? What about that? But if we keep on thinking in those types of ways, we're going to still put on the same politicians that we see who run places like the city of Philadelphia, that run places like the United States government, that runs places like the Senate in the state of Pennsylvania, that actually continue to pay lip service to our people, talking about this is what we're going to do in order for you to get a leg up. Oh, don't worry about those people. Those people deserve what they get because they didn't work hard enough, or something's wrong with them, or something's wrong with their culture. So I don't care what race you think you are, what ethnicity you think you are, if you can't acknowledge the very foundation of this society rooted in anti-blackness, you hold anti-black views. I don't care if you're pink with purple polka dots. The same type of thinking and rationalization exists. Well, Ubuntu, when we think about that concept, we are all one. We are all connected. And if we operate and actually think that way, act that way like the wonderful vendors out here today, doing the work that they need to do, we'll understand that what we're participating in is not liberation work, but survival work. But then the question is, how do we create the spaces for our babies to start thinking, what does liberation work actually look like? And I wish I could say that we're headed in that right direction. But our folks are few in number. We are not winning this fight. And the fight is not a question of militaries or anything. This is a spiritual war, a war that's rooted in something much more deeper. That's why you can talk to someone and be like, all right, bro, and your energy feeds off of each other because you're connected. Not simply because you're in the same place, but because you're in the same space. Mentally, physically, and everything. So when I was thinking even about health and what it means, I think about my own family. And don't get it twisted, John. It is hard. You know what I mean? Not to pick up a drink. And a famous black historian said, when we talk about and think about this type of history, this hard history, this world history, we also need to take into account that we need either philosophy, theology, or a hard drink. And I can't lie, I engage in that hard drink sometimes when I think about these things. When I look around the world and I look around my own community, and then I don't understand, why aren't people more upset? Why aren't people doing more? Why are they willing to accept what already is instead of thinking what needs to happen? One of the first things that I learned when I was in my late 20s, and I love black history since a little child, was about Carter G. Woodson. And Carter G. Woodson wrote a book in 1933 called The Miseducation of the Negro. And also founded what became Negro History Week, now Black History Month. And I asked myself, well, we did Black History Month every single year. There's posters all the time talking about the Santa Clausification of Martin Luther King, right? But why didn't I never learn about Carter G. Woodson? That's a representation of the very core. If you leave out certain facts about the reality that we live in, how can we even process what we need to process in order to make insightful decisions about where we're at? So that goes back to the idea of, at the very foundation, what has happened in the past shaped what we are, but if you distort that past, our vision of what we are is distorted. Distorted to the degree that we're not able to make sense of what's right in front of our face. Am I making any sense, or I'm going a little too deep and abstract about this? Because all these things are connected. But we like to think, oh no, well, you know, what exists now is always what existed. What will be has always been. And there's some truth to that, but one thing I always want to point out is, does anybody know where the prime meridian is at, the thing that determines what time of day it is across the world? Greenwich, England. How did it was determined that time around the world is determined in a small island off the coast of the continent of Europe? Wait, Why is there a continent of Europe which is connected to Asia, which is a small piece of a larger picture? See, these are the definitions that prevent us from understanding the larger thing. The same year that they voted to put the prime meridian in the UK was the same year of the Berlin Conference, where they decided to split up Africa in the spheres of incident. So you need to understand all this to understand that these things are connected. So if we're talking about time, if we're talking about the idea that time is not linear and it overlaps itself, while at the same time our conception of time in the current moment is based off of a map that was drawn by Europeans, and that time derives from the middle of the UK, which is then connected to the Berlin Conference in 1885, what does that tell you about our current circumstances? That means we're living off the definitions and understandings of another people. And not only another people, but another people that is determined to define the world through a vision which is based off of disconnectedness, individualism, and spiritual emptiness. All indigenous cultures and African cultures at one time recognized that God is not separate from us. It's a part of everything. It's in the grass we walk on, it's in our children, it's in how we breathe, how we give out life, and what we bring to the world, what we speak into the world. We knew all those things were connected. So this idea that, no, it doesn't matter what you can do and you just give up some penance and then all of a sudden have a life full of treachery and wickedness, that all of a sudden you can be forgiven. If you didn't put in that work from the beginning, what is actually going to be forgiven? See, this changes the mentality, and I know I'm going off a little bit off. So I strongly encourage people to think of the world differently. One of the ways and one of the epiphanies that I had writing curriculum about Black studies, about world history, about everything civics and power, is that we need to start shifting from simply the traditional model of presenting these ideas to children and shift to what I call a Black studies lens to position our ideas in a different type of way. And that means not simply taking a test to demonstrate mastery of reading and writing, because we look at the situation right now, 56% of Americans don't read past the 6th grade level. And if we even look at that statistic even deeper, people only read out of necessity, not to gain a deeper insight into other people's ideas, to understand and contextualize their reality in a deeper way. So the shift should be, instead of just focusing on that, those are the things that you're developing as you're focusing on the larger ideas, looking at time less as linear and more interconnected and overlapping. So what you're looking at, when you look at Rosa Parks, who was an NAACP secretary, you don't look at her as simply she was too tired to get up, or you don't look at it simply that she did that in order to bring attention to the situation. You look at it in contrast with Ida B. Wells, who won a lawsuit in the South against segregation of her being taken off the ladies' train. You look at Harriet Tubman after the Civil War, being dragged off a train because she was going into areas which were segregated. You put it in the same thing as Plessy, who was an octoroon, who purposely got the white car and then told him he was Black, and then he was told to move in order to challenge the law. Now, all those things happen at separate times, but all those type of things influenced one another and also influence our conception of what segregation and integration, hatred, and peace is all about. But I would even go deeper than that. How do the students attach those ideas, learn about them, and apply it to their current circumstances? That's the Black study lens. So, okay, you can learn about all these things, all these distant people in other times, but how does it relate to when you walk outside in the middle of the road? How does this operate when we look at the current conflict in Iran, when we see the situation in Gaza, when we see the situation in Lebanon, when we see the situation in Sudan, Haiti, and the Congo, and the list goes on and on and on. And the way it's presented to us is something's wrong with them. Again, I'm going to repeat myself one more time. We are here because we know something's not wrong with us. Something is wrong around us. We're operating within a conceptual framework that keeps us incarcerated to the present logic of this system. You see how I'm trying to connect these dots, y'all? Time is linear. That's what they sell us, but we know it's overlapping. So one of the things I want to leave people with is the idea of health and well-being. The only way we're going to protect ourselves mentally, spiritually, physically is recognizing the spiritual emptiness, the meaningless that this system actually shows people to co-sign, and then also the poison that we put in our bodies. So shout out to the black farmers that just laid that on us. Because no longer can we claim ignorance. We have the world at our fingertips. No other time in world history can we see something that's happening in China, have it translated, and understand what it means in our current context. No other time. But what are we doing with that? Are we simply just flooded with this knowledge to the point where nothing becomes possible, yet everything is there? Think about that. Nothing is possible, but everything is there. I think that's called confusion. And when we walk around in confusion, how can we actually start making sense of what is what we think it is? So, I think about my 4 boys, Ishmael, Khalil, Ezekiel, and Malachi. And I think about the world as it is. And all I can hope for my sons, for everybody's sons and daughters around the world, is that we are honest with them. That we allow them to process, but we process with them. That we learn from them as much as they learn from us. And that we go into this world unafraid, because just like Fannie Lou Hamer said, what can they do to us which they already haven't done? And that's the type of motivation, y'all. Because I want them to step into this world with eyes wide open. Not to hate other people, but to hate the situation that creates the circumstances that they see. My oldest son struggles with this idea the most. When we walk downtown and walk around our neighborhood, he's like, oh, I can't deal with this. Why is this like this? And I make it very clear to him, Ishmael, that's his name, named after me. You need to look at the circumstances that produced the conditions that created that reality, and then question that. And then if you do that, then you should start thinking about what needs to be done to create a different reality. But that is lost, drowned with TikTok videos and Instagram videos and all this nonsense. And you can watch that, just know it's nonsense, right? But we present it like it's reality. Like somehow people going in front of the screen and caring about what other people's trials and tribulations are, like they give a damn about your life. Pardon my French, y'all. I'm gonna keep this PG. We ignore the reality of what it is, what we need to do. So, as an educator, as someone who really just cares about humanity, we have to do this with love, even when we're not loved. Even when sometimes we feel like we're in an emotionally abusive relationship with the people we're trying to work with. We need to understand that through our example, that's how we already created victory in the world that exists sometime after us. And if we did it already, if I'm just talking words into outer space, and it has happened, it means it has happened, and it will influence what it is now. I'm getting very esoteric, ain't I? But this is the very base of what needs to be shown, debated, gone over, argued with. I love to see the eyes of 4th graders when I hit them off with the concept of time. Their minds got blown away. What do you mean? This has already happened, and what will happen already did, and what already did already influences what we think we're doing right now. And I have 4th graders coming up to me with their minds blown about that. That's the power. There is no reason why we see our children in school buildings with their eyes glazed over, where they say, I don't care about that. I don't want to know about that. They don't want to do those things because what you see in them school buildings is already putting them to sleep. How many of y'all sat through a class all year round, got an A, and never learned anything? That sounds like a waste of time. So I challenge you. I challenge all the folks that are listening to go home, have conversations with your family, your cousins, your aunties, your uncles, with strangers on the street, and ask them, why are we in this situation we find ourselves in? What do you think can make this world a better place? And how do we do this together? Thank you.